I had just moved into a small rented house on the edge of town. It was quiet and isolated, and I convinced myself that the silence was exactly what I needed after years of living in the city. The house was old but sturdy, with creaking wooden floors and thin windows that let in the faintest chill at night. I set up my bed in the living room because I felt uneasy about sleeping in the back bedroom that looked out into the woods. There was something about the shadows moving in those trees that unsettled me even during the day. At night, I preferred the weak glow of the street lamp that filtered through the curtains at the front. On my first evening, I cooked a simple meal and left the dishes in the sink, promising myself I would clean them in the morning. I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone while the house made strange popping noises like old timber adjusting to the cold. Every sound made me glance toward the dark hallway, and I laughed nervously at myself for being paranoid. I told myself it was just a new environment, and my mind would eventually adjust. Still, I kept the lights on even when I tried to sleep, and the shadows stretched across the walls like thin fingers reaching for me. Outside, I heard the occasional rustle of leaves and once or twice the crunch of gravel that I assumed was just stray cats. Every time I heard those sounds, I held my breath and stared at the front door as if someone would be standing there. The silence after each noise pressed in on me until finally exhaustion dragged me into a restless sleep on that first night in my new home. The second night felt heavier somehow, as if the house itself was holding its breath and waiting for me to notice something was wrong. I tried to distract myself by watching a movie on my laptop, but every creak in the floorboards above me made me pause and listen. The strangest thing was that there was no second floor in the house, yet the ceiling kept groaning as if someone was walking slowly above me. I convinced myself it was just the wind pressing against the roof, but the thought did not calm me. At around midnight, I went to lock the front door only to find it already unlocked, even though I clearly remembered securing it earlier in the evening. My chest tightened, but I brushed it off and locked it again, telling myself I was simply tired. Later, as I lay down on the couch, I heard the faint tap of fingernails against glass coming from the window beside me. My body froze, and I could not bring myself to look until the sound stopped on its own. I told myself it must be a tree branch, even though there were no trees close enough to reach that window. For the rest of the night, I barely slept, and every time I closed my eyes, I felt like someone was standing just outside waiting for me to drift off. By the time the sun rose, I was exhausted and unsure if what I experienced was real or just the tricks of a tired mind. On the third night, I promised myself I would not let fear control me. Yet the moment the sun went down, the house seemed to grow darker than usual, as if the walls were soaking in the light. I double-checked the locks on every door and window, walking from room to room with a nervous energy but still feeling like I had missed something. Around 1 in the morning, I heard footsteps outside on the gravel path. Slow, heavy crunches moving toward the house and then stopping just below the window. Near the couch, my heart hammered as I sat perfectly still, staring at the curtains, waiting for a shadow or a shape to appear. Minutes stretched out endlessly, and then came a sound so soft I almost thought I imagined it. The click of the back door handle being tested slowly, carefully, as if someone was checking if it was unlocked. I could hear the handle rattle once, then stop, then again, more forceful this time, and I held my breath so hard my chest ached. I wanted to call the police, but the thought of speaking out loud terrified me, because whoever was outside might hear me. After what felt like forever, the sound stopped and the silence returned. But the quiet was worse, because I knew someone had been there. I knew it was not my imagination. I stayed awake until dawn, clutching the phone in my hand, but never dialing, because I convinced myself maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was kids or an animal, even though deep down I knew it was not. The fourth night, I could feel something was going to happen, because the air inside the house felt thick and heavy, like it was warning me to leave. I sat on the couch with every light on, but the brightness gave me no comfort. Instead, it only made the shadows in the corners look deeper. Just after 2 in the morning, I heard the soft scrape of wood against wood as the back door eased open, and this time I knew it was real because I had checked the lock myself, and it should not have opened. My whole body went cold as I heard slow, deliberate footsteps enter the kitchen, each one heavy and careful, as if the person was trying not to be heard. I wanted to move. I wanted to run, but my legs would not respond. So I sat frozen, staring toward the dark hallway, while the footsteps grew closer. Then I saw it, a tall shadow stretching across the wall, moving slowly toward the living room, and I realized someone was inside my home with me. The intruders stopped at the end of the hallway, and for a moment the silence was unbearable. until I heard a low, raspy breath like whoever it was standing just out of sight watching me. My hand trembled as I gripped my phone, but before I could unlock it, the shadow shifted, and the figure stepped forward into the faint light, revealing the outline of a man dressed in dark clothes, his face obscured by a hood. He stood completely still, like a hunter waiting for me to make a mistake, and I knew if I screamed or moved, he would come at me. The room felt smaller and smaller until the sound of my own heartbeat was deafening in my ears, and I realized there was no escape without him crossing the space between us. In that moment, when I thought I was about to die, instinct finally overpowered fear, and I grabbed the nearest thing within reach, a heavy lamp from the side table, and hurled it toward the man, not waiting to see if it hit, as I bolted toward the front door with every nerve in my body screaming to move faster. Behind me, I heard the crash of the lamp and the sudden surge of footsteps pounding across the floor as he lunged after me. My hands fumbled with the lock on the front door, slick with sweat and terror, but by some miracle it gave way, and I stumbled out into the cold night air, screaming at the top of my lungs, hoping a neighbor would hear. The man stopped at the doorway, watching me with that hooded face, before retreating back inside and vanishing into the darkness of the house, as if he had never been there. I ran barefoot down the street until I found a passing car and the driver, who thankfully called the police. When officers arrived, they searched every corner of the house but found no sign of forced entry, no footprints, no broken locks, and worst of all, nothing was missing. They treated it like a false alarm, maybe a hallucination from stress or exhaustion, but I knew what I had seen. I knew what I had heard. For weeks I could not sleep without every light on, and even then every creak of the floor or whisper of wind would jolt me awake, shaking and gasping for breath. The strangest part came a month later, when the landlord called to ask if I was comfortable in the place, because the previous tenant had broken their lease after reporting that someone kept entering the house at night, though the locks were always untouched. He laughed nervously when he told me, and said it was probably just paranoia from living alone. But I have never set foot in that house again, because sometimes late at night when the world is quiet, I swear I can still hear those slow, heavy footsteps following me through the silence. I tried to put the whole thing behind me and moved into a new apartment in the middle of the city, where I thought the constant noise and lights would make me feel safe. For a while it worked. I convinced myself the man in the house was gone forever, and that maybe the police were right. Maybe stress had made me imagine parts of it. Then one night, as I sat in my new living room with the television playing in the background, I heard it again. The slow, steady crunch of footsteps outside my door, followed by the gentle testing of the handle as it clicked softly against the lock. My blood turned to ice because I knew that sound too well. And in that instant, I realized that it had never been the house that was haunted. It was me.